Welcome everyone to today's discussion. My name is Kunwar. I'm a senior content writer here at Hire Easy. You may recognize me from some of our videos online. If you have seen them, thank you. If you haven't, that's probably even better.
No, they're very good videos. You're a very funny young man.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you so much. Well, I'm really excited about this discussion today. Over the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've sort of been a fly on the wall to some of the stuff that's going to be discussed today. So I'm excited for everyone to finally hear it. Even though I've been a part of the discussion, some of it I'm not even sure what's going to happen. And I think that's what's really exciting. Hopefully, we all leave today with some awesome insights, some awesome discussions, and some awesome strategies for recruiting for software roles. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Steve and Gillisa.
Thank you, Kunwar. And you're in the video. You were hired tool. You were hired tool man. What were you?
Yeah, hire tool man.
Okay. If you haven't seen that, you can if you search online for hire tool man video, you will likely find it. It will make your day. Anyway, so GP, she'll explain why. We're going to talk to you about 5 essential outbound recruiting strategies for software roles. Or as we like to say, real no BS talk here. We can guarantee you that. So let me just get my mouse on the right screen. GP.
Yeah, well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Gillisa Pope. Everyone calls me GP, but if you know me for a really long time, I might be known as G Money. But I am the Senior Global Director of Talent Attraction and Sourcing at Wilson Human Capital Group. We're an RPO provider, and we provide a lot of services around talent acquisition as well as consulting and advising. I am really excited to be talking to everybody today about, 5 essential rules for engaging and recruiting technical talent, and sharing all the wisdom that I have accumulated over the 20 years that I've been in the industry. And so, Steve, you want to let everyone know who you are? I'm sure they already do, though.
No, they really don't. I do want to emphasize that the Wilson CEO, John Wilson, is actually one of the really good people in the industry. And if you ask him a question, for example, on the Blue Devil, he'll answer it. He'll jump on and answer it. And if you're connected with him on Facebook or Twitter, he'll interact with you as well. So that's pretty good leadership you have there. I'm Steve Levy. I have 2 Band-Aids over my mouth because I do have a propensity to using bad words during presentations, if you've ever heard me or seen me. I am referred, I don't know if this is good or bad, it kind of reminds me of a bad Santa type thing, as Uncle Steve within the industry. But it's mostly, for being helpful. I guess I am one of the grandparents of the digital age of sourcing, going back to being an original member of every online platform. I've spoken at every conference you can imagine, including some of the ones that GP has spoken at. So, yay, sister. I was an engineer for 15 years before I crossed over to the dark side. I've now been recruiting for some 39 years. So I think I've seen mostly a fair share of the good, bad, and ugly of recruiting. And presently, I am the technical recruiting manager for Zip, Buy Now, Pay Later company, global in nature, based in Sydney, Australia, based remotely all in New York, North America, and EMEA. With that in mind, this is going to be fun. So 5 essential things you have to do to improve your outbound sourcing is, surprisingly, understanding your organization, and not at a high level, but at a real granular level, technical level, are elements that often fall by the wayside when developing your recruiting strategy. For example, how deeply do you get into understanding the technical strengths of your organization? What do you do well? What do you do not well? What are some of the challenges? What are the deliverables? I always like to say, you think of your hiring manager as somebody who wakes up more often than not, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat because things aren't getting done. What are those things? Where are the gaps between good people and the people who are not so good? Where are the gaps between what your company is delivering, is offering, and some of their competitors? And ultimately, through this all, what is the value proposition for working at your company? Why would somebody leave a perfectly good job working for potentially a competitor or some other well-known company and leave there and work for you? I mean, those are things that GP, and we talked about trying to create a model, trying to identify what some of the cornerstones are. But any idea why recruiters are somewhat reticent to get into this level of granularity?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a challenge and it could be quite intimidating, right? So you're in talent acquisition, you're a recruiter, that's your deep domain experience, and you're trying to recruit and attract somebody that is in an industry or has an educational background or experience that you don't have, and it's highly technical, right? So there's a propensity, I think, sometimes to want to sound like you have all the answers during the intake call, like you already know the information. And that's really not the purpose of an intake briefing or a discussion with your hiring manager. You really, like you said, want to get to the cornerstones of, what work is going to be accomplished? Where are there gaps on their teams? How can you fill those gaps? What are the most urgent needs? And again, the value proposition, like you said, why does somebody want to come here and work for you and work with your team if they're, like I say, well-fed and happy? Most people in the market right now, well-fed and happy, right? So why would I leave a situation to go to another one? And I think it's can be intimidating to have those conversations. And on the flip side, sometimes the hiring managers have never been asked these questions by a recruiter before, right? So they could maybe have some internal response or reaction to that is a little bit uncomfortable because they've never really thought about it this way. Or maybe there's the realization that the job description or the job specs isn't quite aligned with what they actually need. It was what was on hand.
The funny thing about the JD, we're gonna cover that in a little while, but the managers, when you start asking them really technical questions, for most of them, their response is, well, it's in the job description. And we've read the job descriptions.
Mm-hmm. And I've read all 23 bullet points of your job description.
Yeah, 23 bullets. And the thing is, and 7 of those are repeated. At least 7 of them are repeated. And I think what people don't understand is, strictly, let's just talk from a software job. Software point of view, software technology, and mind you, even if you're coming from pharmaceuticals, you're coming from biosciences, you're coming from manufacturing, what we're talking about here today is thinking, and so your model is going to change to a certain extent, to a great extent, depending on your industry. But like from a tech point of view, I'm just curious, and you can pop it into the chat, is how many of you understand that there are, and this is my engineering background coming in, and by no means, I have not coded in 20 years. I mean, if anyone knows software engineering, my first IDE was an IBM 360 key punch machine. That's how far I go back with my engineering. But, there are 4 cornerstones of every, technology platform. It's scalability. How are you going to grow it? And just because you built it to handle this many users now doesn't mean that there's a straight line scaling as you go up. Latency, response time. The more users you add, the more functionality. The response time becomes an issue. Reliability. I mean, does it produce the same results over and over again? And especially these days, security, and not just security from a hacker standpoint, but from a production engineering standpoint. These are things that the more questions you ask, the more granular you get, the more you self-educate yourself, the better you're going to be able to answer these questions. So another thing, breaking down the intake. You want to explain that don't be a control F-er? GP.
Yeah, so this is from way back. This is probably one of the first kind of commandments that I learned right out of college when I was recruited to be a recruiter. And it was, don't be a control F'er. And that really means, on your keyboard, control F is finding keywords on a document, right? So a lot of times, when you're just starting or getting out, you're looking for things like, you'll ask a recruiter, hey, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for Java and JavaScript and Node and AWS, and they'll give you all of these keywords that they're looking for that they got from the intake call or they got from the job description, and they're just control Fing on resumes and profiles, looking to see how many times those words appear on somebody's resume, and then from there just kind of assuming that that person is qualified for the job. And that is absolutely something that you don't want to do, because that's a very limiting approach when you are looking to build a candidate lead list, or you're looking to see what the total addressable market is of talent that aligns to the profile. So don't be a control F'er. Do your due diligence, try to understand the role, and think about more the work that the person is going to be doing, right? There's 4 kind of cornerstones that Steve had talked about, in terms of latency, security, scalability, those types of things. That's what you want to look for in a profile.
Because one of the things, and I know, well, Tom Bolt's in the audience. He's older than I am, so I know he's come across this many, many a time. It's often the very best people write the worst awful resumes, and they don't have the critical words that are in there. But there are other things, they may have other concepts and phrases that if you knew a little bit more, you could kind of read between the lines, tilt your head sideways and go, I think they may have this, or they likely have this. I think I will contact them or give them a call. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, this goes down to the intake meeting, and the intake is, in the old days, it was called a rec consult. Some people call it a discovery call, as if, you put your Pirates patch on and go, well, blow me down. I'm going to find me a software engineer. But ultimately, in terms of understanding the real job, that is not what the job description that most all of us are working with has in it. You have to be able to, as I said earlier, if the hiring manager, all good managers fret over things that aren't getting done. And so there are problems, there are challenges, there are deliverables, there are barriers, whatever word you want to use, there that go into their KPIs or their OKRs. We have to deliver this many by this time. We have to achieve this sort of latency. They don't articulate those things to the recruiter, but we're the ones who need to know that for purposes of engagement, which we'll talk later. So the important things are, in terms of understanding the real job, is always focus on performance and deliverables, the work. It's and in a somewhat of a metrics generated form. Okay, we want to implement a new a telemetry system that is going to handle the escalation of data from making this stuff on the fly from 1 exabyte a day to 50 exabytes a day, something like that. That it's nerd language. If the performance and deliverables, if you don't have a technical degree, should be things that make you go, I have no idea what they're saying, but it sure sounds good. And then you can start getting into it and getting more into the specifics. But the specifics, the deliverables, critical. Always tread lightly on culture fit. Now, GP, we have some opinions on this, don't we? Mm-hmm. Want to share some of those?
Yeah, of course. I think.
What did you say about culture fit earlier?
Culture fit is, to me, sometimes a cop-out, you know what I mean, with individuals, and trying to find somebody. Of course, you want someone who's going to be a collaborative partner, that's going to fit in with the team, that's going to vibe with the team and do amazing work together. But focusing too much on sometimes things like characteristics or attributes or personality traits are really going to also limit you, or maybe have a halo horns effect on the person that you're talking to, in terms of a fit for the company and the organization. So culture fit, questions around the intake about culture fit and the type of personality that they want. Oftentimes what you get is the hiring manager mirroring back a representation of them or their favorite person on the team. And that is really going to stifle you when you want to think about diversity from day one, right? So culture fit is something that I definitely coach and advise people to stay away from.
But what's unfortunate though is that there really is a preponderance of that in our profession. They're an amazing person. Okay, well, what have they delivered? Well, they're sort of like this, but man, they've got good heart. I know just from speaking with them.
I know from the 20-minute conversation I had.
That
good
they're,
person.
and I don't know how many recruiters are registered psychotherapists in the state in which they're practicing, but just because someone, your friend told you secrets when you're 13, doesn't mean that you bring this innate psychic ability over to the profession. Culture fit, likability are things that can be faked very easily. There are people who are just eminently likable when you meet them, when you interview them on the first date. And then, when you go try for a second date, you go, what the hell was I thinking? I almost dropped a curse word there, but I didn't, just so you know. And one of the most important things with the intake is diversification, diversity from day one. I gotta be careful what I'm going to say here. If you create a group where everyone is the same, your work product will ultimately decline. The same people thinking the same way, practicing the same way, are not going to produce things that are going to change the world. It becomes an echo chamber. So, you can find, from a work style standpoint, GP, we can pretty much determine whether someone's going to be a hard worker, how they handle adversity, how they handle minimal amount of information, those types of things. But the greater the diversity, and that's diversity, not just diversity of diversity of labels, but diversity of thought, diversity of product, diversity of how they work. That just makes the group stronger. And these are the elements that, if you build them into your intake strategy session, if you build them into your discovery call, you're going to be able to do the next step much, much easier. I move my mouse over here. And that is your baby.
Yeah. So now that you understand the work and what needs to be done in the role, you need to understand more deeply the person who is going to be doing that work. And the best way to do that is by developing candidate personas. And candidate personas are really just fictional representations of the people that you want to attract and recruit to an organization. It is, I always say, it's the person behind the profile, the real individual. So in other words, knowing who you want to attract to the organization, knowing the person beyond the profile is just as important as knowing the work that they're going to do beyond the job description. So the first step in developing a really good, strong candidate persona is to invest the time up front to really think about it before you start to source. And some of the things that you want to mull over and think about is, what career stage is this person at in their life right now? Am I looking to attract somebody who is early on in their career? Are they maybe towards the end of their career and looking for an exit strategy, or maybe somewhere mid-career looking for a change? Where they are on their career stage is really going to give you good clues as to what motivates them, what drives them, their relationship with work, how they think about work and what they want out of that. And all of that really helps you develop good outreach methods to connect with a person, like a real human being, to really engage them and kind of cut through a lot of the white noise that is happening right now in the market. The other thing that you want to think about is why they do the work that they do. So recently I read this stat that just stuck with me so much because I could relate to it. And it was from the Stack Overflow developer survey. And they said that the average age for a developer when they write their first line of code is 11. And that just struck me because my son is 11 and he's currently watching YouTube videos, learning how to code, learning how to script, and doing this work on his own. So the one day I just asked him, like, hey, why are you putting all this effort in? Why are you learning how to do this? And he was just like, Mom, it's so cool because I can have an idea and then I can make it and build it and it works. And then I can, do it again and do it again and do it again and keep making it better and better and better. And it's so cool to just be able to do that. And it just made me think like, oh, that's what engineers want to do. That's what developers want to do. That's why they went into this profession. That's why they got educated in that area. So being able to kind of empathize and connect with that and really see, the human drive behind that, the passion behind that, all of that is going to translate in the way that you outreach to people, the way you make connections, the way you build relationships, even the way you position the opportunity to them or how you qualify them during the conversations that you have, how you present them to the hiring manager. All of that is really good stuff. The other things that you want to consider is, motivators, drivers, goals, challenges, roadblocks, obstacles that they have in their career. What are their job seeking behaviors? How and when they go to market? How do they evaluate different companies? How do they approach a job search? Who are the influencers in the market that they listen to? What are their decision making styles? What information do they need to make a decision? What are their online habits, their hangouts, those types of things, right? So just taking some time to think about that and really understand, again, who is this person that I want to attract to my organization? Who's this person that I want to get in touch with and have a relationship with? And there's so many different ways that you can gather that information. I think sometimes as recruiters and sourcers, we don't realize how much we know from the conversations that we have or how good our intuition is when we're thinking about these things and asking ourselves these questions. You can also do a lot of social listening exercises, go on Reddit, go on Stack Overflow, go on GitHub, go on social media, look at different conversations, read the comments, read blogs, listen to a podcast. It doesn't take a lot of effort just to get a sense of what they're talking about and what's important to them. So kind of immerse yourself in their role or their world for just a little bit. You can also incorporate some persona type questions in your intake briefings with your hiring managers. You can ask to talk to top performers. You can talk to your peers who've recruited for similar roles. Even the screening notes, as you're talking to people in the market, make sure that you are including some persona related questions so you can gather that information in real time. So there's so many different ways that you can build this deep understanding and this empathetic view of who you're going to attract and be a real person in the market, doing what you do best, which is attracting and recruiting talent.
What I popped into the chat was the GitHub README project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you seen that one?
Yeah.
That is an absolute keeper. In addition to the annual Stack Overflow, amongst other surveys, this GitHub README project gives everything into the persona, the culture, society, the mindset. Well, you mentioned about a few things there that are really interesting is, during my intake strategy calls, I always, and if you go to my LinkedIn profile, I have all these intake questions listed somewhere on the Blue Devil. But blogs, I'll ask people, what blogs do you read regularly in this space? What newsletters do you receive in your inbox regularly? What sites do you visit just to share information? You mentioned Twitter. On Twitter, and I don't know if we can actually do it here, but I have several. Let me do this the right way. I have several streams that I go to every day. I go to open source, everything related to open source. I have everything related to, believe it or not, MIT, because there's some good stuff that comes out of MIT. Cloud platforms. These are all hashtags and general areas that I read regularly. I on Subbar, on Reddit, there's a subbar called Programming Humor, which is really funny. By the way, for example, like how many software developers does it take to screw in a light bulb? Anybody know? Yes, Gary, we'll share them. Well, the answer is zero, because screwing in a light bulb is a hardware problem. But it's little stupid things like that that make sense. And actually, Gary Brown, thanks for that one. Is all those different, all things that we mentioned here, we'll pop into an email, and everybody who registered will get all these. So all these things, GP, that we mentioned as stream of consciousness, we're going to have to put in an email and send to everybody. Yeah. But also, if there are resources that people who are on this are, pop them in the chat and, share them with other people. By the way, the interesting thing about job descriptions is, and it may sound just anathema to everybody here, is the job description is probably one of the worst recruiting documents ever created. It's actually not a recruiting document in its basic form. It's a compensation document used to grade the job. And so, if you look at whatever it is you're working on right now, if you look at your job description, can you go to somebody and say, well, this actually comes from a question I like to ask during my intake call. It's to a hiring manager is, what will a person have delivered, accomplished, created, produced in the first 90 to 180 days that tells you that hiring them was the right thing to do? Give me specifics. I want nerd talk here. I don't want you to dumb it down so me, the dumb recruiter, can understand it. I want you to give it to me so when I can speak to a person who might be interested in, who might be doing this, and I see some inkling that the person has done something like this, I can pose them a question, that pertains to performance. I need to know that stuff. And so that's why these intake calls are so blessed important. I'm trying to find my mouse so I can move the slide here.
While you're doing that, the most important thing, I think, too, when you are thinking about developing your candidate persona, is that it's an ever-evolving process, right? So as you're doing your day-to-day work and you're talking to individuals and you're building your relationship with their hiring managers and you're consuming information from your social listening exercises, you're constantly gathering new information, new insights, contextualizing things in a different way, and your personas evolve and grow with that over time. And they don't need to be really heavily marketed or anything that is really flashy in terms of visualization. It can just be a working doc where you have some bullet points and you're sharing that information. So definitely personas are the way to go. When you're connecting what you've learned in the intake briefing, what work they're going to be doing and who that person is, that combination is going to really accelerate you when you do begin sourcing.
And there's nothing wrong with it really moving on some levels to the personal side. Hey, look, everybody in our group has animals, has pets. Their names are Bob, Carol, Ted, Alice, Thumbelina, Tony, Odin, things of that nature. It's nothing wrong with that. That just creates, that starts, the persona is what you used to really do to help really humanize what we're doing here. So, but when you add the intake and persona together, that's when you start getting really powerful stuff that is so essential to any outbound recruiting efforts. It's being able to, once you have discussions like this, once you have the information, you can have regular meaningful dialogue with people, in for example, in the tech org. We have Slack here at Zip. I am continuously, I read an article, and in this case it was DevSecOps, and I send it to our head of SecOps site reliability, and we just started bantering back and forth on it. And there's some things that he let loose that I'm keeping in my head, I'm going to use at a later date. Messaging. This is the one thing, my biggest pet peeve actually in this business is recruiters will bounce ideas for messaging off other recruiters. And that's just an echo chamber of stupidity. Be quite honest. If you're recruiting engineers, why aren't you A/B testing with engineers in your company? Why are you A/B testing with other recruiters? Does that make sense, Jeep? Does that make any sense?
You want to socialize it with your target audience, right? So share that information with your hiring manager, their team members, people that you know in the market. Make sure it's going to resonate with them. You're not trying to recruit another recruiter. You're trying to recruit a software engineer or a technologist. So yeah, being able to socialize the information that you're sharing, even down to if you're going to put a post on a professional network, you always want to get that in front of your target audience and your network first before you start outreaching.
You know, I was just realizing I did the same. I did this earlier when I was with some large company. But I'm going to read. I actually worked with the hiring managers, and it's what's interesting is one day I need to turn this into an article or post one day, but ultimately it came down to, you know, the three essential top technical deliver challenges, and I'm going to read them here, and I want you to tell me, anybody in the chat, does any of your messaging come across like this? 3 bullets with the cornerstones of this. Number 1, re-architecting for scalability and performance, the metrics ingestion and processing platform, moving away from Spark to more real-time solutions like Kafka, Apache Storm, so we can improve the data recency from about 3 minutes to 1 minute. 2, creating a performance optimized Java agent. Traffic metrics are the key to optimizing our performance in real time, since our software is deployed on about 1 million hosts every microsecond, and a 0.1% CPU matters. And finally, I mean, this is getting me all hot and bothered.
Like, I'm excited. Like, I'm reevaluating my career choices. Yeah.
And the third thing is architecting and building a Java-based infrastructure library that propagates context across thread boundaries using a Java agent similar to OpenTelemetry, and enabling multi-language support, likely beginning with Golang. Are you kidding me? True story is in terms of, I actually shared this with 106 true experts in the OpenTelemetry space, and I got some 92, 93% back just on that alone.
You were speaking to them.
I was speaking to them. I speak their language. You know, don't, if I had said, you know, we're the largest e-commerce company in the world, right away, people, well over half would have said, no way in will I ever.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so ultimately the other 2 points of any the persona and intake together are always whatever you discover from your intake, from your discovery calls, share it with the other people in that title, in that tech org. Don't give them the job. And so we do recruiters, you know, do you know anyone good for this job? But we don't share the intake notes with them. We're missing some really good, juicy spices to the meal. And finally, discussing the value proposition. Why would somebody leave a perfectly good job over there, making good money, to come to us? The intake, the persona, equals the value proposition. What will they be doing here they won't be doing there? Critical. Next, Jeep, another big element. If I can find my mouse again.
Yeah, leveraging market intelligence and research. So this is my favorite part of the job. So being able to use the market intelligence that you have to really better understand the total addressable market. So the total number of prospect leads that are in the market right now that are potentially aligned to your ideal hiring profile, who you want to target. And being able to use multi-source tools for that and validating that information across a lot of different platforms. One of the things that you want to avoid when you actually go to market and you start recruiting and sourcing is focusing on platforms that are single source, right? Where they are kind of forcing everything to be contained on one platform and you're only getting one viewpoint or one lens into the market. You're missing the bigger picture and you're going to miss a lot of diversity that's out there focusing on a single source tool. So you want to use a tool that is multi-source, that is aggregating information from many different sources, something like Hire Easy. They multi-source from over 45 different platforms to give you a really good, complete, holistic view of what that market is and what the potential is out there. And again, this goes back to diversity from day one too. So you want to think as expansively about your search as possible. So you want to start with the total addressable market and think about it bottom up, not top down. So a lot of times platforms kind of force you top down. So the first thing you think about is, what kind of job titles am I looking for? What other alternate job titles are there for this? You know, how many years of experience am I looking for? What educational background am I looking for? Where did they need to go to school? What did they need to study? All of that filters you down. All of that narrows you down to a really, really small piece of pie. But what you want to do is you want to think more expansively, holistically, start from the bottom up, start with skills, start with technology, think about the work that they will be doing, the action behind the work, what the outcome of the work is going to be. And if you think about it that way, your search will build up much larger, and you can segment through who your primary contacts are, who your secondary contacts are, and be more systematic as you're engaging people in the market. So definitely want to use your market intelligence to identify the total addressable market, and then also gain that competitive intelligence too. So here's an example that we've used.
But here's something I want to ask you. You know,
Yeah.
You've been with Wilson for a few years. When you go into it, when you engage a new client, are they typically? How do they typically view talent intelligence? And what do they typically do? And what have they typically doing?
So I think there's been a real shift in the last couple of years. So in terms of talent intelligence, it was just sometimes data that you could provide. So I've exported this information and here it is, and you figure it out. But now, because the market conditions are so constrained all over, everywhere, no matter what the role, no matter where in the world you're recruiting, it's never been more difficult. The supply is never going to meet the demand that we have, right? So the focus in on market intelligence is more action oriented now. So they need to understand, okay, I've given you these requirements. I'm telling you, this is the person I want to attract. You have to help them understand this is the smallest piece of pie that's available. You have unintentionally, maybe intentionally, gave yourself the smallest piece of pie. And your job as a recruiter or a sourcer is to get them a bigger piece of pie, right? You can have this, but you can also have this, and you can have this, and you can have this. And all of this is qualified for the job, just a little differently than what you're thinking about, because we want to go after a broader set of leads. And I think
with your cat, you know what it reminds me of? It's anybody here have cats and ever use the laser beams, the red dots?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sort of what reminds you how most companies view talent intelligence. They just want the red dot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, think of like darts, a dartboard. If I can't get the dart in the red dot, I'm a failure. But that's not really a good way to view talent intelligence, is it?
No, it's not. You want to think more holistically about it. You want to think expansively, and you want to think about it more diverse. The other thing that you want to know when you're thinking about the market intelligence is the competitive intelligence as well. So who else is in the market right now recruiting for the same talent that I'm recruiting for? And what are they offering? And what am I offering? And how do I compare to that? And what are some changes that I might need to make in how I'm positioning the opportunity, or what I'm offering as a reward, or the value proposition that I have? They need to know who else is out there, because it's not a solo game. Everybody is out there pretty much fighting over the same talent, particularly in the technology space. So being able to have that information, and I call them battle cards. Those are my favorite things to make. And it's a sales term, right? So you understand, I'm going up against this company.
Yeah.
This is everything I need to know about them. This is when I win. This is when I lose. This is how, we have to evolve over time. This kind of technical recruiting in the market that we're in now, it's the long game. It's not the short game. It's very much the long game that we're playing.
What's interesting about that statement, and this is a couple of decades of doing it with bears that out completely. It's that the short game is easy compared to the long game, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Short game.
it requires a difference. It requires a different mindset to not just manage your own work, but to manage the expectations of others. And there's no easy. I mean, that's where the partnerships come into play, right?
100%. Yeah. And the long game, the strategic game, is the relationship building with the talent as well. And, understanding that there's a finite amount of talent in the market and being able to build relationships with people over time, because sometimes their timing isn't right. They're interested in the opportunity, but not right now, or, they're just really intensely passionate about what they're working on. So you have to maintain that relationship with them over time so that when opportunities come down, in the future, you have these warm candidates that you can tap into to engage in the process. And that helps you, expedite things and pull through the funnel a little bit faster, to be, tactical about it. But yeah, it is a long game, a lot of thinking, a lot of strategy. It's, some recruiters are out there playing checkers, and, most recruiters need to be playing chess.
So tell me about this example of yours. This is
Yeah.
cool stuff.
So we were working with a client, and they were looking for a pretty particular engineer that they wanted to onboard to the organization. So this was somebody that was, early in their career, just kind of starting out, maybe 3 to 5 years of total experience. But the hiring teams were really insistent that they needed to graduate from one of the top 20 universities that they had on a list. And then also on top of that, they needed to be diverse. So they wanted us to fill the top of the funnel with a very specific skill set from a very specific set of universities, and also diverse. And when we ran our market intelligence, we could see that the talent pool that existed within this university requirement was quite limited in terms of the skill set. So these universities were not graduating people who were taking job opportunities and building the skill set that our client was looking for. And they had diversity, but not the most diversity. So what we did in our market intelligence is we understood, okay, if we looked at these other universities in the area and we expanded this list out, we actually were seeing higher rates of graduation from diverse talent. And they were also more aligned to the skill sets and the technical requirements that they were looking for. So we were able to go back to them and say, hey, I understand the strategy, and we can definitely implement this strategy, see what shakes loose, but here's where we should actually be focusing. By the way, this group of people here are in a much less competitive space. So everybody in the world is focusing on these top 20 universities, but no one's really focusing on these universities here and making a grab for this talent. And this is where you're actually going to be more competitive. And so once we were able to visualize for them what that looked like, what that strategy looked like, we were able to shift gears and actually fill their funnel and hit the hiring requirements pretty easily. So there's a good example of why you want to bring your market intelligence to your hiring managers, socialize it, explain it, and make it actionable through your sourcing strategies.
When this project was completed, or when this information was delivered to the clients, what was their response?
Oh.
was there any pushback? But we want
no pushback. It was right there, kind of black and white, in the data was right there. This is what this looks like. And so I think it was very eye-opening for them to be able to see that. And it was, and it accepted, because we did have a conversation. I also think too, one of the things that helped us in that situation was that we were proactive with this information. So we didn't wait a couple months and say, oh, this is hard, and this is why it's hard. We came to the forefront of it. Here's the market conditions. Here's where it's going to be challenging. Here's how we're planning to overcome those challenges. And it was much more accepted at the front end. And we were able to engage them early on in creative problem solving.
Which actually brings to mind probably the most important element of outbound recruiting. And that is really engaging in the most human way possible. Show of hands from the audience. How many of you, when first, we're not even going to talk about the information, what's in the message, but how many of you start out your messaging with, "Hi, I hope you are well," or "I love," I know you don't, Kayla, or "I love your profile. You're a perfect fit," followed by 17 exclamation points. Things of that nature. Or, in my case, on my LinkedIn profile, just because I like messing with people, I changed my first name to an emoji. So when I receive in-malls, if any of you know me, back in 2015, I created this term called in-mall. And that's what many people, yes, Nicole, is many people who use LinkedIn, just send as much stuff out as possible, hoping that if I send 100,000 messages out, maybe I'll get 2 good people. Well, that just ruins it for everybody. But so what I ended up doing was, just change my first name to an emoji. So I know when I say "hi surfer emoji," that the person has not read my profile. And there are an inordinate number of forums of the technical nature, of technical people, which call us names that even I won't use. Actually, it's not a numbers game, Carlos. It's a quality game. Quality is hard. Quality takes time. Quality gets people to trust you. As you say, if you think of what the bulk of people do, and GP, you've seen the JDs, for example, like 3/4 of the job description is telling how we're a world-class company, we work hard, we play hard, all that BS type of branding stuff that probably makes you cringe just reading it every time. But we don't realize people don't get married after the first, well, some do get married after the first date. I don't know about you, GP, but I had a long engagement, and it took a while. But that's the reality of it. And, so you have to be patient. You have to be willing to, well, there's a saying, the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Mm-hmm.
Better one is my friend Jeff Newman. He's at Textio night right now with Jackie Clayton. And he says, "I don't want to make them drink. I just want to make them thirsty." And that's the whole concept here is, instead of bombarding with emails, you want to drip, little by little, use platforms like Sourcewell or Lemlist, create some good content, have a content library, know your audience. The persona is going to drive the messaging. The deliverables are going to drive the messaging. Putting them both together, be honest, give them information, give them access to you. If you're interested, send me your resume and apply with LinkedIn. No, don't send me your resume. I just want to talk first. Things like that. Have integrity. Don't lie.
I think you make a good point too of, one of the things that I coach recruiters on is, you're not going to nail it first try with an email. You're not going to entice them to respond to you or to say, "Oh, this is a great opportunity, I'm going to apply for it." Your objective is really just to have a conversation, to get a response, to have that human on the other side just say, "Hey, yeah, I'm interested," or "Let's talk for a couple minutes." Always lead with, "I just want to learn about you. I want to know about you and your career goals and where you want to go. And I can answer any questions you might have about the company that I work for, the company that I'm recruiting for." But you just want to engage in a conversation. And that's what you mean, with the dripping that over time and the frequency in which you communicate with people and the consistency and the persistence that you need to have. On average, it takes nearly 5, sometimes 6 attempts to get somebody to respond to a communication, and it's not that they're ignoring you or they don't want the job. They're just either not seeing the communication with how much they get on an hourly basis. I mean, it's insane how many in-mails some of these top engineers get daily. How are you going to cut through all of that white noise to have your message seen or to be heard? So it's not a numbers game. It's really just a quality and conversion rate that you're looking for.
Yeah, and ultimately, you think about, as a profession, the more that we, Tom goes, it's like, I found you on LinkedIn and you're a perfect fit for this job. Well, that's a whole nother story. But the bottom line is, it's information is what drives, correct information, performance. We hire people to do a job. We don't hire, and if we're hiring someone because they're a culture fit and not considering the fact whether they can do the job or not, we're doing a disservice to everyone. Because ultimately, they won't get the job. They won't deliver what needs to be delivered. So that's where platforms like Hire Easy will give you access to information that is essential, that goes well beyond what you can get from LinkedIn. And let's be honest, if you sole source using LinkedIn, you're probably missing an exceptionally large chunk of the addressable market.
Mm-hmm.
Why? That's their algorithm. That's why great sourcers, we will site search LinkedIn rather than search within LinkedIn, because that gains us access to more things than the algorithm will actually give us. Hire Easy does it for us. So on that note, I'm looking at the time. Do we have any questions from the audience?
So nothing came in on my end, but I know some people could be nervous to ask questions. So I encourage anybody to ask questions in the chat or that FAQ section.
If you know GP and I, don't be nervous with us. And if you feel like it, you can. And it's funny, we didn't put this in the presentation, but I'm actually gonna get my Blue Devil LinkedIn. This is my LinkedIn. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, I'm going to pop.
We have a question, Steve.
I see that from Gary.
Yes.
Well, there are a couple of things. Real quickly, Gary, is there a particular role that you're looking for right now? Theme from Jeopardy is playing. I'm with you. Okay, software architect. And any more details you can give to me? Is it more? Is it Java side, .NET side? Is there a particular industry?
Java.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Oh, okay. Now notice how GP and I both went, oh, yes, this is in for ping. Okay, Spidey sense right away. If I wonder if I can share, I can actually share I can share a screen, can't I? Let me see what I can do here now and open up another screen here. Everyone can see, what can you see now, GP? Can you see all the tabs?
Yeah, I can see all the tabs.
Okay, if you see this new tab, this new Google window? Yep. Good. So what I'm going to do is right now, I'm going to just type healthcare software architecture. I'm going to try something. My Spidey sense is telling me open source. And so here, you see what I did, Gary? And this is just knowing, kind of having a sense of this. I'm looking at things like healthcare software architecture, open source. That could be a critical thing. This gets me a whole lot of things to read. I'd have to start reading through this, but I'm looking at things like architecture design of healthcare SaaS, SOFA and open architecture. There's a lot of stuff here I can start reading through and getting to things. One other thing here, then we'll get to Kayla, because Kayla, that's a really good question, is one of the things I like doing, and Gillisa had mentioned it, is conferences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go real basic healthcare software conference. You know, I'm going to actually do something better. I'm actually going to site search edge.com, and I'm going to look for all sites, if I can type really quickly. Oh, fudge. Notice I caught myself there. So I'm just curious. I'm going to look for all conferences where in the address is the word speakers or attendees for things that are healthcare related. So I see, for example, here, I see healthcare experience design, or I look at all these sites here, and I'm just curious. I'm going to click on one. It may not be the right one. Medicare for All strategy, and it tells you the speakers, and I'll bet you some of these are architects. I wouldn't be surprised. Connect with me, Gary, and I can share. Well, HIMSS also, there's also a HEMA and all related stuff, and I can show you how to drill down into all of those. But you want to get into Kayla's question there, GP?
Yeah. So how do you build upon a persona in a classified environment where software engineer candidates keep a low profile? And how do you approach them with little to no contact information? Yeah, that is difficult. A lot of software engineers, whether they're in a classified environment or they're just really tired of lots of emails day in and day out, they have what we call dark profiles, or profiles with very little information on them. So in terms of building the persona, I think a lot of their motivators and drivers are the same, but you can build off of that from conversations that you have with individuals, or, working with your hiring managers and their high performers who can give you a little bit of information about how maybe working in a classified environment is a little bit different. Oftentimes, I think individuals who are software engineers who are in a classified environment also have sometimes a military or veteran background that you can tap into to see if you can get leads that way. And then with the contact information, it's really important to use, your multi-source tools, being able to get contact information aggregators, being able to find different ways of connecting with those individuals, whether it be through social media or being able to message them on private boards, or seeing, if they have GitHub accounts or places where they're, open source or sharing information. It's a little bit more difficult, but you kind of have to, be persistent at it. And the other component too is just the referral game of thinking about it backwards. So where did they work previously, using your market intelligence? So, if I'm looking at people who have a classified background, where did they go to school? Where did they start their career? Where did they work? Look for those commonalities, the similarities, and try to expand out your search through those techniques rather than, job titles or, blank pretty much profiles. So those are just kind of like some quick tips on how to approach that.
Yeah, let me just add, Stephanie, I think you're the Stephanie, you're in Peru. Kayla, there are a lot of Kayla hunters, and I'm trying to find you quickly. But the interesting thing about people with classified backgrounds is they don't, it's like Fight Club. They don't talk about Fight Club. But what you do know is, the companies that are most likely going to be classified have classified people, and so that's sort of how you find them. That you make certain assumptions, and that way you can look at things like, let's say you're looking for somebody at where our good friend Dean DaCosta is. He's at Lockheed Martin, and so you can do things like, and I'm going to show you here again with one of these conference things. They still go to conferences, and so you can do things like this one. I'm just going to look for somebody who is, for example, Lockheed, and might be a software engineer. Know what I'm going to see? I'm doing this on the fly, and you get this a lot in, you get robot stuff. But here's an interesting one here. I look at, good old CPP Con, because yes, Lockheed and many defense companies are C++ accounts, but these are all the attendees. And if I become a control F-er, right now for a second, and I look for Lockheed, I go Andrew Castor, Lockheed Martin Space Software Engineer. I get a hit. Then, maybe the Andrew Castor is related to other people, but this is just one way to do it.
We have one more question.
One more
what
question.
What are good subject lines for emails to candidates?
Oi. Well, let's see. Their opinions, subject lines are like opinions. Everyone has them. You could go.
I'll tell you a trick. Do you want to know a really interesting trick?
Yeah. What do
From
you
a
do?
marketing perspective? Subject lines in all lowercase letters get opened at a higher frequency because they look different.
And that's where it is. Things like sometimes, I'll put emojis in there. If you have to use LinkedIn Recruiter, put an emoji. You go use emojipedia.com and put an emoji there. They're different. They are different. Putting in a person's first name might help. Putting in the company they work for might help. If you're good at writing short little snippets about, with certain deliverables, help, we need help. We need help scaling to, whatever it is, something like that. I did a couple of presentations years back on using humor in subject lines.
I was going to say, being funny, like I'm trying to recruit you. Should be very
really
obvious.
Right. I want to recruit you, not marry you. You're not a perfect fit. I don't love your profile. How dare you? Things like that. But part of it is that's where we talk about A/B testing. If internal to a company, try things, and from from a non-work email people in your company in that title and see what kind of responses you get. Ultimately, that's the best way to do it. Any more questions?
That was the last question, but thank you, Steve and GP, for joining us. We'll also send out this recording to everybody too, but if you need anything, I think Kunwar reminded me, we're sending out an email after this too, correct?
Yep. So we'll be sending a couple emails, one to people who attended, one to people who registered, and then, anybody else in the space. And if GP and Steve, if you guys have any resources that you talked about today that you'd like us to include in those emails, feel free to send them over. So we'll make sure everybody has all the information. Yeah. Thank you guys so much again for all the insights. This was awesome. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.